Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling, and I'm so glad to have you tuning in for this episode. I'm very, very excited. A lot of you already know, and a lot of you have already supported. But on this episode, I really want to go in depth and talk about my new book, which is all about one of my favorite bands ever, Y&T. Down for the count, the Y&T album review. This is my second book after Unspooled, an adventure in 8 tracks, and this time around I did an album by album review of all of their studio albums with a lot of help from some great panelists. I posed the questions, they gave me the answers. I've got Martin Popoff on here, Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility. I've got Mike Ladano from Grab a Stack of Rock. The list goes on and on and on. As a matter of fact, in the beginning of the book, you can see the full list. Cover artwork, no less than Mr. Hugh Syme himself. Unbelievable. It was a chance question. I wanted to talk to Hugh about working on one of Y&T's albums, Contagious, and he did that, but then he asked if I had anyone working on the cover art. So here we are. It's a beautiful cover. It's so very Hugh Syme, and the more you look at it, the more you see in it. This book takes you through all 12 of Y&T studio albums to date. I hope that there's a 13th someday. I'd also have a section on the live albums, compilation albums, guest appearances, and it's, to my knowledge, no one has corrected me on this yet. But to my knowledge, it's the first time that there's ever been a book dedicated to this band, who has been going for 50 years now, and a band going for 50 years should have a book about them. So, if you'd have told me back in 1990 when I first got into this band, said, you're going to write a book on Y&T, I'm like, no, somebody else will. I'm not going to write any books. But I'm very proud of the work that everybody has put into this. I'm excited about, the sales so far. I have to send some shout outs. John Nyman himself purchased a copy of this, not to mention my Unspooled book. So thank you very much, John. So to have a member of the band actually give a seal of approval is a pretty darn big deal. It's mostly by the fans, for the fans. And I'm hoping that people that have listened to the band in the past revisit their catalog and maybe fill in those gaps in the albums that they don't have, and maybe people that have kind of only heard of them on the periphery will decide to finally check them out, because it's great stuff. It's good, solid hard rock. And Dave Meniketti is still going today with the current lineup of Y&T. They've always had great lineups no matter who's been in the band. So today it's John Nyman, Aaron Lee, and Mike Vanderhule. Would like it if they toured somewhere closer to where I live, but hey, that's just one of those things. And so on this episode, I want to kind of go behind the scenes, because from doing these panel books, I've learned this from Martin Popoff, who you're about to see. There are two ways of getting the content. You can either ask the questions or email the questions if people want to answer them that way in writing. Or you can do what you're about to see and actually do a Zoom call with people, ask them the questions. That way they don't have to write it down. They can just talk and express themselves. See a lot of familiar faces on here. If I do this right, I'll have them all. I'll have them all credited here in the description. But this is kind of give you a look of what it takes to put together a book like this. And I'm really happy with what everybody came up with. So let's hear from the panelists answering some of the questions I asked them about Y&T. First Yesterday and Today album, were you into this album from the get-go, or was this one that you discovered later?
So I got the First Yesterday Today album as a new release, as a risk. Didn't know anything about it. We used to, as friends, call it risks. And I remember I bought Scorpions Virgin Killer, and my buddy Forrest Toop bought Yesterday and Today, and we played him at his house on his stereo. And he liked mine better, and I liked his better, and we switched. So literally within an hour or so, I own the First Yesterday and Today album as a new release. And Yeah, my thoughts on it were that it was uniformly heavy throughout, which we liked as kids because we kind of measured things for
Hey, like
heaviness.
I couldn't find them until they put them out on CD in the early '90s.
No,
I
I actually I had them on vinyl. We had a record store called Rolling Stone. Actually, the Chicago area had some really good record stores for imports and just oddities coming from different parts of the country. So I was able to find it, but I had to search for it. And I'm almost positive I bought it at Rolling Stone Records in Norwich, Illinois.
cool.
Yeah, and I know I bought Yesterday, Today, and Struck Down at the same time.
And you knew it was the same band?
Yes. And how I knew, I don't know if it was through word of mouth. See, so here's the deal. We had a very popular radio station called WLUP, The Loop. Steve Dahl was on it. I'm sure you've heard of it. And they had a theme song, and it was Squeeze. And we were like, this theme song is better than anything they play on the radio
And I
station.
can't see them bringing them back for one song. So
Yeah.
that's what makes me think it was 2 years old at this point. And it stands way out on the album because it's far and away the most commercial thing on there. So
Yeah.
it sounds to me like, and this has happened, this happens again. They sort of acquiesce to A&M's wishes, and they don't even put it out. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, we sort of covered this in Blue Murder and a few shows that you've done on Rock Daydream Nation, where I call them option songs.
yeah,
Where maybe they put a couple of ballads or a couple of songs that are kind of possible probables and just album tracks.
yeah.
So I think this would have been maybe a probable, but there are other singles that were released off this album, and I think that A&M made a decision that this album was going to sell any more, and they weren't going to get any more commercial airplay, so it didn't get down to the probable list.
Every once in a while, I'm pleasantly surprised when I see Y&T referenced out there in the big wide world. A couple of years ago, my wife sent me actress Jessica Chastain's Instagram post for National Lipstick Day, and the accompanying music to the post was Lipstick and Leather. And was that somebody on her admin just looking for a song with lipstick in the title, or do you think there might be more closet Y&T fans out there than we know of?
So I think maybe a little bit of both. I definitely think there's more fans out there. I do think there's more fans out there, but it's like that whole thing. It's like we say it all the time. They think like they stopped at Summertime Girls, right? They like that song, and maybe they heard a couple of other ones, and then they just didn't. They think they never did anything else, when that's totally untrue. They did all this other stuff. So I think let me change that. I think there's a lot of fans in waiting, right? If they kind of just do a little bit of work and kind of say, hey, wait a minute, they have more albums after this. Oh, I like this. I like this too. I think so. I definitely think, especially like the internet, I think like the fans who are the fans, they're gonna know all the stuff. But then there's those fans that just kind of like, they get bored. If something else new comes around and they went to that, if you just kind of stuck with it, right? Or if they rediscover, which is one of my favorite things, is rediscovering, like discovering a new band and got a whole catalog I can just jump into. I think there's a lot of those fans that liked the band back then, but for whatever reason, because there was other stuff coming out, and then they were just kind of like into the other bands that were bigger and more popular, they just kind of forgot about Y&T. I think they're waiting to be rediscovered, and I think that they can kind of beef up their Y&T listening is my opinion. I think there's a lot of those fans who are just didn't realize, hey, they kept going, they didn't stop. I think what they think, because they weren't really being played on the radio there for a while after Summertime Girls, the radio play got less, I feel, at least around here it did. They probably thought they were no more, right? So they didn't actively look, and again, no internet, so how could they know? Like, we knew what was presented to us back then. So if you didn't hear a band anymore on the radio and you couldn't find their albums anymore, then you probably thought they were done, but kept going. They never really stopped. So I think they'd be pleasantly surprised and they would, get back in the Y&T game.
I like that. Fans in waiting. I like that. Yeah, I've often thought all people need to do
Okay.
is hear. So start with Down for the Count.
Okay.
This album had a lot of things going against it, not least of which is the cover art in an era which was so visually driven. Coming off their first really successful album, not only did they change the art designer, they abandoned their logo. Even if the album had the same visuals but still used the classic logo, do you think that might have helped its chances?
I'm not sure about that because it's just a really odd cover, like you said. It might have, but they did put the logo on the back at least, so people still got a sense of it. But it might have helped them. I think more what hurt them is that they kind of their strength is also kind of their weakness, where they have some of the heavy riffs that a lot of the hard rock guys like, and then they start bringing in keyboards, which a lot of mellower listeners like. And I think that is what hurt them more than the cover. Is it was kind of they're in two worlds, which is good but bad at the same time.
I think I am. Yeah. Okay. So this album appeared to have all the makings of a late period breakthrough from Y&T. There's a revamped image that, for better or worse, made them look contemporary. John David Collider at Geffen Records, who were simultaneously working miracles for Whitesnake and soon to follow Aerosmith. Classy artwork from no less than Hugh Syme, a killer first single which should have dominated pop and rock radio that summer. What happened?
This is an interesting thing for me because I have a kind of thought about Whitesnake and Aerosmith at this point. It's a comparison that's made reasonably often about a lot of bands. And I would say that Whitesnake and Aerosmith, although there's two bands there, are quite unique examples of what was happening, because Whitesnake realistically were pretty much unknown in the US at this stage. Yeah, they had a cult following and they were massive over here, but they're a blues rock band is what they are, and a great blues rock band. That's my era of Whitesnake. Let's be honest, that's the era of the band that I love. I kind of fall out with Whitesnake a bit after 1987. Not a lot, but a bit. Aerosmith, on the other hand, are a great comeback story. So, prior to Done with Mirrors, they were done. That was it. We're out of here. We're never coming back. That's not what's going to happen. And not that Done with Mirrors is phenomenal, but it was a good comeback. And they had that opportunity to change the image, to make the long coat a little bit shinier, to, have bandanas and things all flat that just weren't there before. And people were happy to have their kind of returning heroes do that. Y&T never went away. A lot of bands never went away. And I think that when suddenly these bands who were wearing blue jeans and a tight striped t-shirt, as Dave is, I think, on the back of Earthshaker, are coming out looking as they do on the back of Contagious.
Yeah, capes.
Yeah, and suddenly we're seeing lots of, chest on the show. Torso is suddenly in play. And yeah, Joey Alves does not look comfortable here at all. And
no.
That's good for me, is that you look at them and you kind of go, they're all kind of going, look at Phil there. His face says,
no. And it's muted colors. Like, does it look like a hard rock album? If you were like trying to get the attention of someone who was
what year
likely
did
to like them,
1989?
It came out like summer 90, like May 90.
I think we're still in an era of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and in particular, like drugs is illegal, sex isn't. Sex sells, but let's not stir up the whatever that Tipper Gore outfit was at the time. Let's not stir them up. So let's put a beautiful woman on there because she's a 10. That was the name of the album. The album was 10. So let's put a 10 on there, but let's do it in a classy way.
So one of the things that I've always admired about Y&T is that they didn't succumb to the temptation to go grunge like so many of their contemporaries. If anything, the one concession to the 90s that they made is in the cover art. There's no logo. It's a very alt-rock looking front cover, even though it was just a stock photo from the 1970s from like a loud parade, the kids covering their ears. Do you think they should have stuck at least a variant of the logo on there?
Yeah, I'm not crazy about the logo on the album cover, and I'm not sure how the classic logo would work on that photo. You're right. It's very alt-rockish looking. It could be a 7 Mary 3 or Dishwalla, album cover. I'm okay with the way it is here. It's kind of a sign of the times, and Like I say, I don't know if the classic logo, maybe if they could have came up with a variant that kind of fit that cover, that would have been good, but I like it the way
These
it
albums
is.
are only slightly different than the type of songs he'd be writing for Y&T. In fact, Jimmy DeGrasso plays on several tracks in the first one, and Phil Kennemore co-writes one song on the second. You've talked about this, but why do you think there was such a long gap before another album?
Well, part of it, I think, was the frustration they were dealing with. They put out those 2 albums, and you're still not going out and touring. You don't have those avenues that you had before. Another part, I think, was the lack of availability of Steph and Jimmy.
Yeah,
because Steph was playing with 3 artists, and eventually he had to stop playing with Y&T. And Jimmy DeGrasso, I looked into it. I've seen him play with Suicidal Tendencies. I think I saw him play with Megadeth. He's a talent, and that guy. When you're like an Eric Singer, when you play in that many different bands, and Paul Stanley said this in his book, it means you're good. Jimmy DeGrasso, I think I might have seen him with Black Star Riders even.
Oh yeah, he was with them for. Yeah, I did the I wasn't going to do it, but my buddy Matt said you should probably do it. There's no better place. So I did go through down the rabbit hole of all of the guest appearances or all of the times that any of the Y&T guys played on other people's albums, and by at a certain point, I was like, oh, shoot me in the face. Like there's just so many. I had no idea how prolific Steph Burns was. It's not quite at like a Steve Lukather level, but it's getting there. Like, yeah, he made all and across the spectrum musically. I mean, he's played on songs by Tevin Campbell and Color Me Bad and Oleta Adams, and then he's doing like Jeff Beck tribute albums. And I knew he was at Alice for a couple of years. I knew that was easy.
Jimmy. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Face Melter sounds professional.
And it doesn't have the loudness wars. It's not pinned.
I'm sorry, say again?
It's not like the victim of the loudness wars.
Oh,
so
right.
Like it's not all pinned.
Right.
It's not distorted. It sounds
no
good.
On the top. It's not freaking Saint Anger. It's
well, it's not even Death Magnetic, because Death Magnetic, if you turn that up loud, it distorts.
Yeah, it clips. Yeah, Dave knows what he's doing, man. This guy has produced other bands. He's produced demos for other bands and stuff like that. He knows what he's doing, and he's like me. He's a technical. I don't want to call him a nerd, but he's kind of a technical geek, And I think we bonded over that when we first met, because it was like, oh, you know this stuff too, and blah, 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 So being a lifelong computer guy, he was into computers and stuff, and that. Man, we just gelled like that, but that's him, and his quality standards off the page.
So there you have it. The experts have spoken. Go listen to some Y&T, absolutely. And I want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for supporting everybody who's purchased this book. If you're interested in purchasing it, it's on Amazon. All you got to do is look at my name, Tim Durling, or type in Y&T down for the count or Y&T book. I'll have the links below anyway, and it's Amazon wherever your home is. If you're in the UK, it's Amazon UK. Australia, it's Australia. So it's available all over the world. My understanding is that in a lot of places, it's not taking too long for people to get their books. So if you wanted to order one now for someone, it's probably there by Christmas at the time you're watching this, or at least close to it. But if you like Y&T, I think that most people that like the band would say, yeah, there should be a book on them. So I'm happy to be the one that provides it. Maybe someday the band themselves will do an authorized autobiography. That would be awesome. And if you want to check out what Y&T are doing officially, their website is yandtrocks.com. They're also on X, and they're also on Facebook and Instagram. So I'm not affiliated with the band. This is not an official publication. It's just a fan doing, supporting a band that I've been a fan of for decades. All right, so Down for the Count, the Y&T album review, available now on Amazon. Thank you very much, everyone, for supporting the book, and thank you for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions. We'll see you later.